Good afternoon, dear children. Namaskar. You all are watching eVidya channel number 2 and our YouTube channel NCERT Official. And I am Kusum Prasad. This is our live interactive session and it's for English for class 2. And it's a poem, Bumblebee. And to teach this subject, our expert is Miss Kanika Bhalla ma'am. Ma'am, you are welcome in this session. Namaskar.
Thank you so much.
Ma'am is assistant professor from Guru Kashi University, Bhatinda. So, ma'am will tell you about this poem and what is all in this poem we will learn from our expert. So, before we start our session, I will tell you how you can participate in this live interactive session. You can send your feedbacks, your questions, your queries on our various medium. Our phone number is 8800440559. You can also email us on our email ID, that is dth.class2@ciet.nic.in, and you can also drop your messages on our YouTube channel, that is NCERT Official. So let's begin our session and we move to Miss Kanika ma'am. Ma'am, क्या कुछ है इस poem में? The Bumblebee, the Humble Bumble.
Yeah, so this poem is written by Dr. Amit Ranjan and this is one of my favorite poems, and I'm sure kids that you will also love it very much. And this poem is actually a very simple poem, but it has a very deep meaning. And as we progress on, we'll learn what the deep meaning is.
Yes, ma'am, definitely. Let's start it.
Okay, so the title of the poem is The Humble Bumble. The Humble Bumble poem written by Dr. Amit Ranjan is a poem that we are going to do today. So bumble, as you all know, is a kind of a bee, and it is different from honeybee in a lot many ways. And this is a task for you which I am setting in a very beginning, that you have to see, you can Google it, what a bumble looks like. And the word humble means a person who is very laid back and he talks nicely to everyone and he doesn't boast of anything. So let's move on to the poem, The Humble Bumble. And twice upon a time, and thrice upon a time, and all the cats and mice upon a time, there was a little bumble. Little bumble was very humble. So kids, the poem starts with the line, and twice upon a time. You might have heard a lot many stories from your grandparents and in your schools as well. But this poem starts with a strange sentence structure. Instead of saying once upon a time, the poet has said twice upon a time, and then he moves on to say thrice upon the time. This means that this incident, the incident that we are going to talk about in the poem, has not happened just one time. It keeps on happening and happening. And then he says, and all the cats and mice upon a time. This means that since the time when there were cats and mice on earth, the incident has been occurring. So then he says that there was a little bumble, and little bumble was very humble. And as you can see in the picture, we have drawn 4 little bumblebees. They look very cute, just like you little kids. And they are small and cute and fluffy and have small feathers. Let's move on to the second stanza. And a honeybee came and said, "Hello, you fellow bee, I haven't heard of your fame, but let's fly and fly free." And in this stanza, a honeybee comes into the poem. Now we are talking about a bumblebee. You might be confused. What are we doing when we refer to a honeybee? So kids, as I said, that there is a difference between a honeybee and a bumblebee. A honeybee is the one which makes honey, and a bumblebee. So can you guess, does a bumblebee make honey? This is a question for you that we can come to after the poem. So honeybee, let me tell you a brief information about honeybee. So honeybee is very thin as compared to bumblebee, which is very cute and soft and fluffy, as we discussed. And bumblebee and honeybee, they belong to different species of insects. And once you grow up, since you are very small right now, once you grow up, you will learn more about both of them. And as their name suggests, honeybee makes honey, but bumblebee doesn't make honey. So in this point, at the time of the story, a honeybee comes in and tells the bumblebee that she hasn't heard about the bumblebee. And I assumed that most of you would not have heard about the bumblebee as well, and you might be as confused as the honeybee. So she says that let's fly free and fly free. And at this point, Bumble tumbled and Bumble fumbled. So you might have heard the story of Jack and Jill. In that also, they both tumbled down the hill, and Bumble tumbled again, and Bumble fumbled. So fumbled is a word which means when you cannot speak properly, when you are at a loss of what to say. And the bumblebee, at this point, she started tumbling and fumbling, which means that she was confused. Now this is a story about the time when bumblebee didn't fly. So honeybee was the one which was flying, and she was free, and she invited the bumblebee to fly as well. But bumblebee, when she heard of this, she was confused, and so she tumbled and fumbled. But alas, alas, alas and sigh, little Bumble could not fly. To be or not to be, that became the quest. I will be a bee, said Bumble, and put questions to rest. So here the poet says that after a long many tries, Bumblebee realized that she could not fly. And now the question was to be or not to be. So this is a very beautiful expression that the poet has used here, and the reference is to Shakespeare's Hamlet. It's a wonderful play, and you will read about it when you might be in your college when you grow up. So this is a reference to Shakespeare's Hamlet. He was also confused whether he should be or he should not. So in this poem also, poet says that Bumble is confused whether she should be a bee or not be. And that was the quest. Now this might be a word that you might not have heard, quest. So a quest is something it's like a journey which you go upon in search of something. So the quest of the bumblebee was whether she wanted to be the bee that flies or not. She decided that she will be a bee and put questions to rest. She says that I will try my best to be a bee and so try to fly. And Bumble flapped, he couldn't fly. And Bumble felt trapped, he couldn't fly. And Bumble stumbled, and Bumble fumbled, and Bumble thought he had crumbled. So in this case, Bumble flapped her wings. You know, the word flap, I'm sure that you might have heard of this word. Birds also flap their wings when they are about to fly. So Bumble had little wings and she tried to flap them, but he couldn't fly. And he felt trapped because he couldn't do that. So why is Bumble feeling trapped? Because he's just like you little kids. When you have lots of homework to do but you want to go out in the park to play, you might also feel trapped. So Bumble is also feeling trapped because he is not able to fly when he wants to. So he stumbled and fumbled and thought that he had crumbled. So crumbled means when everything is destroyed. So he thought that his life has been destroyed because the one purpose that he wanted to do, which was to fly, he was not able to fulfill that. And the old magnolia tree said, "Hey Bumble, how you be? Will you help me? Will you carry my pollen to that yon tree?" So in here, comes the huge old magnolia tree. So, dear children, you are from all parts of India. Have you ever seen a magnolia tree? It might be right in your backyards. Go run and check. So, the old magnolia tree which was there, he said to Bumble, "Hey Bumble, how you be?" So he asked, how was the bumblebee doing? How will you help me? He asked the bumblebee to help him. And what was the help that he required? It was to carry his pollen. Now, I'm not sure whether you have done that in your science classes or not, but plants and trees and all of the flora, it grows by the transfer of pollen from one plant to another. So, pollen are small yellow substances which are in the flower. If you just go and check any flower, there might be small dusty like substances which are called pollen, and they are actually something which help in the development of the seeds of a plant, and in this way plants grow. So the magnolia tree says that, will you carry my pollen to that yonder tree? So he asked the bumblebee if he could help in development and growth of his own by carrying his pollen from this tree to the next. If in case you have not heard about pollen or have not read about this concept, you can learn about it from Google as well. And Bumble said, "Oh magnificent magnolia, why don't you ask the bees and the birds? I am just a loud mouth with words and a failure like you never heard." So Bumble here is feeling very sad. And can you imagine why he is feeling sad? It is very simple, because he cannot fly. So, as we discussed, that pollen is very necessary in the growth of plants, and there are birds or butterflies or bees that transfer the pollen from one tree to another, from one flower to another. So Bumble here he says that, "Oh magnificent magnolia." So he says, "Oh mighty and beautiful magnolia, why don't you ask the birds and the bees?" "Why are you asking me?" he says. "Why don't you go and ask the birds and the bees?" And why he is saying that? Because he is feeling very sad and low that he cannot fly, because if he wants to carry the pollen from one flower to another, he needs to fly. And because he cannot fly, he says that, why not you ask the birds and other bees to do this task? He says that, "I am just a loud mouth with words." Now, if you have seen a bumblebee or even not heard a bumblebee, there is a buzzing sound that goes. If you have ever gone in a park to play, you might have heard the buzzing sound of bees. So they are the bumblebees which make a lot of noise. But here he says that, "I'm just a loud mouth with words, that I cannot do or accomplish a lot of tasks, but I am just a loud mouth. That means I talk a lot, but I cannot work. And a failure like you never heard, and I am such a failure that you have never heard of anyone like me." So we are talking about a time when bumblebee couldn't fly. You have to keep this in your mind. And this poem is basically a journey of how the bumblebee learned to fly. So at this point he is saying that the bumblebee couldn't fly, and he is feeling sad that he couldn't do that, and he has refused the magnolia tree that he cannot do what he has asked for, which is to carry his pollen from one tree to another. And magnolia said, "Why don't you stop yapping and start flapping your wings? You see, we have things to do." And to the right you can see a beautiful painting of magnolia flowers. As you also heard before, that Bumble also referred to magnolia as magnificent. It is because magnolia tree actually looks very beautiful, and it's very vibrant, and it has very nice flowers, and the flowers are beautiful too and very fragrant as well. So Magnolia here, he tries to boost the confidence of the bumblebee and he says that why don't you stop yapping? So yapping here means to talk a lot. So he says that bumblebee, hey, you are talking a lot, you are not doing what you are required to do. Why don't you start flapping your wings? You see, we have things to do. That we have a lot of things to do, but it will only happen if you start doing them. Otherwise, you will just keep on topping and accomplish nothing. And Bumble flapped and sang and rapped till he flapped 130 times a second, and in another second all the tumble and the fumble was a matter of past, and he flew past the rumble and grumble of the world. So here the poet says that Bumble, he actually tried to fly. So he flapped and flapped. He started flapping his wings. He started to accomplish something that he had never thought of doing before. So he flapped and flapped his wings and he sang because he was making that buzzing sound all the time, and he rapped and rapped. So the poet has beautifully referred to the buzzing of the bumblebee as rapping, not the kind of rapping that you might have heard in televisions, but this is the sound, the beautiful sound of a bumblebee buzzing. And he flapped 130 times a second. Now imagine 1 second, like we count 1, 2, 3. So in just 1 second before the person could say 2, can you flap your arms 130 times? Bumble did that, and that is how in another second he was able to fly. So the poet has described it very beautifully. He says that all the tumble and the fumble was a matter of the past, which means that he was tumbling and fumbling and trying to figure out things, but when he did that, when he actually tried to flap his wings, all this tumble and fumble was a matter of the past. Why a matter of the past? Because he was now able to fly. And he flew past the rumble and grumble of the world. Now, when your mother makes something like tori or tinde, you might not like it and you start rumbling and grumbling that I don't like it, I might want pasta or pizza. So the bumblebee was also rumbling and tumbling before that he couldn't fly. But now he flew past all of the rumble and tumble of the world. And how did he do that? With a lot of determination. Also, the role of Magnolia Tree cannot be forgone here, because he was the one who actually told the bumblebee, motivated the bumblebee that he could do that. So, and Bumble rose above his weight and defied gravity, and Bumble became great, but he said, I am just being myself, so please call me Bumblebee. So after Bumble had accomplished that impossible task, now why do I call it impossible? Because of the weight of the bumble. As you can see in the picture too, the size of the bee and the size of his wings is very disproportionate. So the wings are very small, but the bumblebee is very big. So according to the laws of physics, bumblebee is not supposed to fly. That is why the poet has wrote that Bumble rose above his weight and defied gravity. So you know, dear kids, do you know about gravity? Have you learnt about this in your science class? So gravity is something, it is the force which keeps us on the ground. Otherwise, we'll be all flying like birds or clouds in the sky. So it is just due to the gravity that we are able to walk on earth. So Bumble, after he flapped his wings for more than 130 times a second, he rose above his heavy weight because he had a large body and small wings, and he defied gravity. So this was a task, like impossible task, that he achieved, and he becomes great after doing that. But he said that I am just being myself. Now here comes the most important lesson of the poem, which also describes the title of the poem, The Humble Bee. Like, even after doing an impossible task, he says that I am just being myself. He is not trying to boast or belittle other insects. He is trying to be humble. He is kind. He says, please call me Bumblebee. I would not be called by any other names. And a magnolia flower whispered, he can sing, he can sting, but he has seen the stumble. That's why he's Bumble the Humble. So the magnolia flower, he whispered that the bumblebee can sing, the bumblebee can sting, and bumblebee has seen the stumble. So this means that the bumblebee buzzes a lot, which means he can sing. The bumblebee has a sting. If you go very close to a bumblebee or any kind of bee in the world, he will bite you, and when an insect bites you, it is called stinging. So the bumblebee can sing and sting, but he has seen the stumble. But he has seen the stumble, it means that he had struggled a lot to achieve where he was right now. That is why he is Bumble the Humble. Like, even after doing such impossible tasks like flying with small wings and a large body, defying the principles of gravity, he is still trying to be so kind. That is why he is Bumble the Humble. So kids, this is a very important lesson in the world, that you are small kids right now, and every one of you must have something to which you might have thought that when I grow up, I'll be this, I'll be that, I might be a renowned doctor or a pilot or engineer. But the poem, according to the poem, if you stay humble and kind, that is how you can be a great human being. In this way, in this case, the bumblebee, even after doing such great things, was so kind, and that is why he is referred to as the beautiful, small, cute bee. You can also be wonderful and great at the same time, but remember that you have to be kind.
So like every poem or chapter, there is a message for our children, our viewers, our learners.
Yeah.
So there is also a message the poet wants to convey to us, to be humble.
Yeah.
So can you elaborate on this message to our
Yeah.
children's? What message the poets want to convey to us,
Yeah.
to our children's?
So, as we already discussed, that you will have thought of a lot of things, that when you grow up, you will be this and that. But the poet says that you have to be humble all the time. There are so many fellow human beings that might not have the same opportunities that you might have, that might have faced a lot many struggles. But even after reaching a great place, a great position, you have to remember that you have to be kind, soft-spoken, and consider the needs of your fellow human beings. There is, students, there is a lot of disparity in the world. There are rich and the poor. There are a lot of classes. Now, this is something that is beyond your class right now. But when you grow up, you will learn that in social sciences, that money is very important. Once you have the money, you can win the world. But as the poem suggests, if you are not kind, anything, money, power, they are not useful if you are not kind. So that is the main message of the poem, that you have to be humble all the time, like the bumblebee.
Yes, ma'am, it was very beautiful poem, The Bumblebee, The Humble Bee. So, and you beautifully explained this poem to our children, and thank you, ma'am, for this beautiful session.
Thank
Namaskar,
you.
ma'am. Thank you. So dear children and learners, you were learning English for class 2. I hope you all enjoyed this. तो हम आज का सत्र यहीं संपन्न करते हैं, हमें दीजिए इजाज़त। लेकिन आप कहीं मत जाइए, अभी बहुत सारे सत्र हैं, बहुत सारी क्लासेस हैं ई विद्या चैनल पर, आप जुड़े रहिए। हमें दीजिए इजाज़त। नमस्कार।